Oh, Bob asked me what the other person looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a good day.
You started it, you finished it.
Wow, what a good turnout here this morning. And I gotta tell you, this has already been a truly uplifting day. I am absolutely proud of every one of you who have stepped up to say, I want to take part in this thing called We the People, our government. And I just applaud you for doing it. It's what we need more of. And that Rockwall continues to be the model when I talk to other places about how you ought to do it. Between the two clubs you have here, the turnout you get, and the participation is absolutely amazing. And I hope to see it grow. No, not one of you here is here by accident this morning. Many of you had something else you could have been doing, but you came here because this is where God brought you, because nothing happens by accident. And I don't know what it is, but there's something that you're here for, and you will go take away. I believe that some of these people, and many of them were running today because they showed up at one of these meetings, they heard something that lit the fire of liberty to burn brighter in their soul, so that they wanted to step up and do something, not just talk about it, watch it, and complain about it. So I don't know what it is you're here for. It may not have a thing to do with politics, but it's for something. And I thank you for being here. And got 3 parts I'd like to talk to you about this morning. So if I happen to get a little long, you have something else to do, I won't be offended at all if you need to go leave. But I tell you, I'm truly blessed. And I think I know most of everybody here in the room, but for those of you that don't, I'll just introduce myself. I'm a recovering political apathetic because I had never run for office before my fire got lit with the Tea Party meeting about 11 years ago. My wife Kay had been the politician in the office, or the activist, and always wondered what she did. Well, I figured it out after a while. Who I am and how I will talk to you this morning so you have a perspective. I'm first of all a Christian who serves my Lord Jesus Christ first. Amen. My family second. And now Texas third, and I once served my country in the U.S. Air Force. And I speak to you as a conservative. There are different viewpoints on government, and people talk from their viewpoint. So just so you're not misled, what I have to say to you is from my perspective as a constitutional conservative with Judeo-Christian values. The 3 things I'd like to talk about is give you a little overview of what's been happening down in Austin, or is about to happen now that we finally got past the bill filing deadline and are moving towards having committee hearings. We started having them this past week, and we've got a full slate for next week. And then I'll talk a little bit about the power grid. I'll give you a quick overview of what I think we know about what happened and what I see happening going forward. And I want to wrap it up by talking about defending liberty. So in the bills, you know, the purpose of government is to protect. It's not to provide free stuff. It's there to protect our liberties, protect our rights. They're so clearly defined in our Constitution. And so I'm just going to go over, there have been lots of bills filed. I've got 44 that I'm the primary author on, and 57 that I'm a joint author on. And there'll be a lot of joint authoring going on this session because of the condensed way we're approaching it and the limited number of committee hearings we'll have. And so rather than do battle of whose bill on particular pro-life would get heard and so on, I opted to, if I found somebody else's bill that was close enough that I thought that that's what my bill would end up looking like, I joint authored with them, and we worked together on it. Matter of fact, I'll tell you a little bit later that my grid security bill that I have filed this time, I filed yesterday with 22 senator joint authors on the bill. So it only takes 16 to pass it. So, but let me just give a quick summary and some categories. First of all, one of them is if any of you here last Saturday and heard Jeff Younger talk, you will know that we have some real issues in needing to protect our children from a number of different ways. And so we've got several bills. We've got some on trying to stop some of the exemptions that exist out there, loopholes in obscenities that can be presented to children. We're looking at stopping lewd material such as the Netflix cuties, which is exploiting very young girls. Don't want that to be a trend of what we're going to have to watch. We're also going after the issue of transgender, the mutilation of young boys and girls a number of different ways, prohibiting insurance to be used for it, stopping it altogether, and criminalizing doctors who do this. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about what's going on right here in Texas, right now, at the rate of about 300 a year in Dallas, and about the same number in Houston and other cities in there, where kids under the age of 13, girls are having double mastectomies, and boys are having their genitals removed, or being given hormones to permanently change their life. And we've got to put a stop to that. And that's fairly high on the priority of numbers. Second is protecting our Second Amendment rights. They're coming after us in every direction. I've got a number of bills. One is to make Texas a Second Amendment sanctuary state. Yeah. All right. Federal government. Second is to one of the magnets that attracts people who really want to do harm to people are our gun-free zones. And there are two places that those primarily take place: churches and schools. Last session we fixed the church problem, and we saw how effective that was in stopping a shooting at church. We need to open up our school campuses, K through 12, to concealed carry for licensed holders, just like they can carry anywhere else. It will be the biggest deterrent to someone who wants to show up and do harm to our kids. They pick the schools because they know there'll be very limited, if any, defense there. And so I think that will add to our safety. Got a bill to maintain the license to carry in the event we go to constitutional carry. Now, I'm supporting the constitutional carry, but we've got to make sure we maintain the license for those who travel outside the state so we have reciprocity. If we don't have the license, we're going to lose reciprocity with the other states. And there are a number of bills for constitutional carry. It is going to have a harder time getting to the floor in the Senate than it is in the House, but we'll have to see what happens. A lot's been happening with immunizations, and so we're trying to put in place some protections for choice, so people have a choice and not forced to be immunized when they choose not to, for whatever their reasons, whether it's religious or medical. We're looking at making sure that there is no Medicaid discrimination against anyone that would be refused medical services because they did not get a vaccination. And we're also making it prohibiting any government agency or business from requiring a vaccination as a function of employment. We want to make sure that the school exemption does not get waived during a pandemic. And there will be several of those. I'm hitting kind of the highlights, folks. There is a whole lot more out there, but I'm trying to give you the flavor of what's going to be taking place here. Right to life, coming at it from every direction you can possibly imagine, from outright banning abortion to making Roe versus Wade non-existing in the state of Texas, to trigger bills that would automatically make abortion illegal if Roe versus Wade was to be overturned at the Supreme Court, and also looking at protecting the end of life. Right now, most of you probably don't know that when you go to the hospital, you're signing papers that turns the end of your life over to the hospital to make the decision that they can terminate your life support equipment at their will. All they have to do is give you 10 days notice that they're going to do it, and if you can't find a place within 10 days, they can legally and be totally protected pull the plug. Over a year ago, they were going to do this to a 9-month-old baby called baby Tinsley. Some of you may know about that. The hospital decided that her quality of life was not up to their standards, and they wanted to terminate her life. Thank goodness the court stepped in. Baby Tinsley just celebrated another birthday last month. And, well over a year that so put an end to that. Protecting our liberties. There's a number of things we need to do. One, I have refiled a bill that I had filed my first year down there, and that is to create an interstate compact for border security. That is, that we would take this into our own hands by joining with one or more other states, and by doing so, we can take on the federal role of enforcing our border. For those of you who don't know it, right now, our hands are tied. Federal law allows only the federal government to stop illegal aliens from coming into the country. We can only assist them. And if they're not doing their job, we have no means of actually stopping and deporting people coming in. And believe me, they are coming in, if you haven't paid attention, and we have seen this very personal up close. Kay's got some of the Senate lady friends down there that have sent her pictures that live down in the McAllen area. And these are Democrats that are appalled at what they see. They show hordes of people coming through McAllen. People are scared down there, and it's going to be a problem. So we have got to do something to stop this.
Well, they're Biden votes. He gives them the votes.
Right. But, well, they're coming across wearing Biden t-shirts.
Yeah.
Big issue, election integrity. There are probably more bills filed on election integrity. We have more bills filed on the issue of election integrity. We have one large omnibus bill that covers everything. It's almost about 3/8 of an inch thick. Lots of subjects coming at it from every direction. Senator Brian Hughes is chair of State Affairs, where the bills will be held. He will have a large bill. I've co-authored bills with him. I've co-authored bills with about a half a dozen other senators. We're coming at it. And every question you've asked about mail-in ballots, about voting times, about vote count, about the rights of poll watchers, it's all being covered. One of the major things we're looking at in this is changing how we actually elect people. We right now have three processes. We have we have mail-in ballots, we have early voting, and then we have election day. We're going to make it two. Mail-in ballots, but we will limit that to those who are outside the county or expect to be outside of the county during the period of early voting and election day. If you say you are and you aren't under what we got, it's a felony. The second is we will have an election period. It will begin on one day and end on election day. No gap between the two. That's one reason we found it very well. We're trying to put cameras in all vote counting areas, in all areas except for people actually vote. So we have some evidence of what's going on. We saw this last section that where those counties, places that did have the videos, they had evidence to show what was actually happening. The last area, next to the last, Sunset Commission. I was on the Sunset Commission where we looked at about almost 20 agencies in the review they get every 12 years, and I'll be carrying the bill on the Texas Commission on Fire Protection and the Texas Commission on Jail Standards that we're up for review this time. And the last area is on our grid protection. The bill I've had, many of you know about, of protecting our electrical grid against threats primarily of the EMP or electromagnetic pulse and the GMD or geomagnetic disturbance and cyber and physical attacks that would be by an enemy. That managed to get out of the Senate all three sessions. Last session, we got it out of the Senate. We got it through the House State Affairs Committee. Speaker Dave Phelan was the chairman. He helped support it, got it through, got to Calendars Committee, which anybody knows anything about the House, that's the dark hole where things go to die, where those of influence can convince one person to tag a bill in calendars and it never sees the light of day. It's not a process that I would have designed. I don't particularly like it, but it is what we have to deal with. This time, the bill I filed yesterday with 22 senators, that's Democrats and Republicans. Matter of fact, one of the first joint author on it was the Dean of the Senate, John Whitmire, and the rest followed along. I've had calls from a number of House members. It was filed by Matt Shaheen from Collin County in the House with several joint both Republicans and Democrats. And so our bill has changed that this time I expanded it to address all hazards, not just EMP, GMD, cyber, and physical, but to address anything that could take down our grid from operating. Which leads me into giving you an explanation that I've gleaned from sitting through hours of committee hearings with PUC and ERCOT and suppliers, transmission lines, generators, etc., of what happened. Now, we won't know for a while the details of it, but in summary, we say it was really a perfect storm. Not the weather, but of things coming unglued, of coming together that all contributed to it. There's no one thing you can point to that says that's what caused it, except the legislature didn't do its job 11 years ago and in between to make sure we had a process and a system that was reliable and resilient. But set that aside, and let's look at what happened when the storm was coming. A lot of people said it was wind energy and it was solar energy. It was that they were the blame. Not really. I mean, we know they're not reliable. They're not reliable because they only operate, when they're working perfectly, they only operate 50% of the time. Anything is only working 50% of the time and you can't control that time, it is not reliable. And so it's not its reliability because we knew it wasn't reliable. But the policy that is behind the advancement of wind and solar from the environmental side made a major contribution to the situation we found ourselves in, because it was the environmental movement that pushed the so-called free energy in wind and solar. Folks, there's no free energy out there. It is also the environmental policy that has resulted in the closure of well over 100 power plants in Texas over the last several years. Coal power plants that have been shut down, doors closed, just sitting there. They could have been operating, but because of environmental policy, they couldn't. It's the environmental policy that does not allow us to operate our gas-fired plants at maximum capacity. So we did not have the capacity. Now, for those of you that understand how the power system works, or don't understand, it is a very delicate operation, very delicate. There is demand, that's what you will need, and the power companies and what they supply. This is not like water. You can't create or produce ahead of time a big bucket of electricity and wait for somebody to come use it. You can only produce what's being demanded. And so the supply side is continually changed as your demand goes up and down. And as long as your capacity is well above here, it works just fine, which is all it does. But these environmental policies out there have moved us where this gap between our maximum capacity and our demand has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And for the last couple of years, we have been well under 10%, closer to 3 to 5% at times on capacity with everything working. But that environmental policy is what has closed the power plants, and then the way we operate with the wind and solar, they don't pay their fair share. They don't pay the transmission costs that the gas-fired and coal-fired plants pay, and they don't have to supply the energy when they commit to it. Gas-fired plant, when they bid on providing power and they can't, they have to actually pay for another plant to replace the power they said they were going to provide. Wind and solar doesn't have to do that. So they get a real free ride. We've spent almost $20 billion in the last several years on wind and solar so they could get cheap energy. That's not very cheap to me. And we continue to spend $1.4 billion every year holding them up. So the policy that's behind them is one of the major contributors, because the end result was it is not economically feasible to attract new gas plants or nuclear plants here in Texas. And so we haven't had but just a very few in the last few years, which leads us to recognizing that most of the power plants we have out there are old. And when things get old, they don't work so well. And then we had the combination of a rapid drop in temperature, a rapid rise in demand, and in that process, electrical things break. If you buy a light bulb, take it home, put it in the lamp, turn that lamp on and never turn it off, that bulb will burn forever. I mean, it will just burn and burn and burn. But you turn it off every day, it's that heating and cooling that wears it out. And that's what happens with the power plants, with their turning on, turning off, moving up and down to meet the demand. It wears things out. And the power companies operate with a philosophy that would have killed us in the military. We had periodic maintenance in the military. You knew things were going to break sometime, and you replaced them before their MTTBF, their mean time between failures, so they didn't break when you needed them. Power company doesn't operate that way. They operate to failure. They go fix it when it fails. And so that means you're out of power, things didn't work. So that's what happened. They started up, and then power plants started failing. And so they had to get others to come online. And it just escalated as the demand kept going up, power plants dropping offline, that our capacity dropped well below the demand. The only control over demand was then to go to rolling blackouts, to stop people from turning on their switches, because you couldn't do it any other way. So some people ended up with rolling blackouts, some ended up out of power for a while, to make sure, because had they not done that, we could have lost the entire grid system. Because if you get in an out of balance, and we came within a fraction of frequency out of balance, we were at 59.3, just barely above it, and at 59.3, it shuts down everything, and in the process, it would probably burn up most everything out there, and we could have been without power here in Texas for weeks, if not months, had they not done the rolling blackouts or the shutdown. But the problem was that when they turned off the electricity, they didn't have it planned out well enough that they actually turned off the power going to the gas suppliers, supplying gas to some of the other power plants, so they could not operate. And so we ended up having a system that ate itself. And then you combine that with the fact that ERCOT had put in lots under computer control, lots of combination of computer and human, and they had tested it down to the so-so level. Never really down to the hard lower levels of what you do rapidly in turning on and off and moving around to make it work. They never even practiced it. So they were operating in unknown territory, flying by the seat of their pants, and came within truly seconds of us having to lose the entire grid system. But we didn't, thank goodness, and got through that. But when you listen to PUC and ERCOT describe the fingers point just like this. It's everybody else's fault. Nobody recognizes it, and there's a whole lot more to it. But that, I just wanted to explain, get you understand what happened. So our bill that I've got on grid security will address that problem from a hardware standpoint. The interoperations of processes and procedures between the power plants, the transmission lines, and the consumers has got to get worked out with a different relationship between PUC and ERCOT. But we'll be addressing the physical security of it in our bill, and you wouldn't believe the number of text messages and phone calls that said, boy, Bob, they should have listened to you 3 years or 6 years ago. So we'll be interesting. It's not over. There are bills to be filed to address that, and if I get an update on what's happening, I'll let you know about it. Now let me kind of wrap it up here to talk about what I think is where we need to go from here. And one of our most precious rights is our liberty. Is protecting our liberty here. And we have folks here who have done that. I want to recognize all of our veterans. All of our veterans, stand up, please. These are the guys sweated and bled to protect our liberty. It's something that we don't even hardly think about. And like I said, when I started, God has his own way of working things out, and you never know what he's really up to. A few months back, I was at a meeting out in Van Zandt County, and one of the young guys out there came up to me and said, I got something for you. I said, what? He said, yeah, I ran into this guy from Rockwall and at a book fair in Tennessee last month, and he asked if I knew you, and I said, yeah, and he says, well, here, give this to him. And so he handed me a book, written by somebody from right here in Rockwall. Ali Masters. Ali Masters was born a Pakistani Muslim, and fortunately was raised by some relatively wealthy foster parents, sent to Texas to get an education. Came over here and he got him an education. He really enjoyed the Texas life at the Texas colleges here for a while, until he met a Christian woman who changed him. They got married. He became a strong Christian, strong businessman, very active in his church, and he wrote a book. And I would have never read it. I would have never picked it up, but because it was given to me, I was intrigued. I said, I've got to read this. It wasn't a long book, but in it, he had, and I know why God had me read it now, because I found one of the most profound statements written in there. Because throughout he compared life as a Pakistani and here in America. And he said, most Americans do not appreciate the liberty they live in because they've never been without it. Think about that, folks. How often do you think about that liberty? The liberty that the veterans you just saw stand up here, that defended that. The ones that aren't here to stand up, the ones that stood up, they consider themselves the lucky ones. They came back. A lot didn't. There's been a lot of bloodshed over this, and we have been letting our liberty slide away from us. And it didn't happen by accident. U.S. started right in the beginning. They started before 1776. The Mayflower Compact, with the group that came here for religious freedom, to have the liberty to worship God as they chose. Our nation was founded on our right to worship our God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In it, they refer to God several times as they wrote how they were going to live life when they got here. And then along in 1776, when they put together the Declaration of Independence, the words that are in there. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are empowered by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Something we all take for granted. When is the last time you really thought about the life you have, the liberties, joys, and your right to go pursue your happiness? Now, some of them got curtailed for the last year, but then they wrap it up at the end by saying, and for the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And some of them paid a big price for it too. Many of them lost their lives because of it, and a lot of others lost their lives protecting our rights of liberty and to pursue happiness. And it didn't stop there. It went on with the Constitution and made it real clear when it said, we the people. We the people. That's not you guys the government. That means us citizens. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. to ourselves and to our prosperity. It's not just for us, folks. It's for those that are coming after us that we have this responsibility to protect it. It's what makes me feel so proud of every one of you who stood up and said, I'm going to get involved. I'm going to help straighten out the school board. I'm going to help straighten out the city council. I'm going to work on the county. That's what they were talking about. You know, Ronald Reagan, who I greatly admire, and I think everybody in this room does, had a lot of really good things to say. One of them was that freedom is not free. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We did not pass it on in our to our children in our bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day, and we just might be getting too close to that one day for me, but one day we'll spend our sunset years telling our children and grandchildren what it was like to live in the United States where men and women were free and liberty reigned. Because folks, if we lose our liberty here in Texas, we lose our freedom, where in the world are we going to go? Cuba? California? Michigan? No. You know, 185 years ago, San Jacinto, Texans had lost battle after battle. Gonzales, Goliad, Concepcion, Bayer. When they woke on the morning of April 21st, they found themselves kind of in a predicament. They had a river on one side, a swamp on the other side, and the Santa Anna's army, they outnumbered them significantly, just over the rise. They didn't have anywhere to go. So what did they do? They fixed bayonets and went over the hill. And I know all of our Army and Marine friends here understand that when you fix bayonets, you're about to get real up close and personal with the enemy. But they did that because they knew that they've been losing battle after battle, and the Santa Anna's army had gotten really complacent. They took a siesta like they were doing every afternoon. And in 17 minutes, Texas had become an independent nation.
Amen.
Because they did not quit, they did not give up, they got knocked down, they got knocked back, they got beat, but they stood up, they kept coming for the principles of liberty. The principles of liberty to live for. The principles include limited government. That is a government that's to protect our rights, not to provide us with free stuff. A government that has fiscal responsibility of spending your money on things that are needed to protect you, not to redistribute the wealth to those who are too lazy to work. It requires personal responsibility to protect our individual liberties of religion, speech, the press, and the one that makes it all possible, self-defense in the Second Amendment. Pauline Dietrich, a good friend of mine that started and runs the Casalinda Tea Party and has held meetings twice a month for as long as I can remember, always ends her meetings with having people stand and repeat after her when she says, "If it is to be, it is up to me." And that is what we have here, folks. There aren't other people out there to protect your liberty if you aren't willing to do your part to stand up and help protect your liberty. I don't know what you're doing, but I can tell you that this is what I'm going to continue doing, that I'm going to be the person that I said I was. I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. And when the electorate out there moves to the left, they get to elect somebody else, because I will promise you I will not move left with them at any time. I will continue to keep the promises that I've made to protect and defend the principles of conservatism. Our God is the creator God, and without him, we don't exist. And we must return to being a Christian nation. And I promise you, I will not back up, back down, backslide, cave, or collapse. I will stand and defend those principles. I will fight them with every fiber in my body until the last warm breath leaves my cold, stiff body. Because liberty we need to pass on to the next generation. God bless America. God bless Texas. God bless you. You guys want to ask some questions? I'll be glad to. I know somebody has to go, that's just fine. If you got some questions, Gary?
I want two things. I want to thank you for putting out the information that you put out. And those of you who don't know, if you ever contact Bob for a question, he gets back to you. And it's within a day with an answer. And there are very few politicians that will do that. I mean, it might be that he gives the answer to someone to get to me, but I have never, I mean, I've done this probably 6 times or 7 or 8. I get an answer back. And you can reach the man, you can get an answer. He never sidesteps, promises made, promises kept. I can testify that's the truth.
Thank you. Sam, you had a question?
Bill 3, you were going to address the, was it Senate Bill or House Bill 3?
Oh, okay. Yes, there's a bill in the House, and I will say I have a different view of what we need to do with regards to executive powers. I think that the caption on the bill that's being proposed over there says it all. It's to expand the authority of the governor during an emergency declaration. I think it needs to be just exactly the opposite. There are some things in that bill that I find it hard to even understand how they got there. One is it actually creates an oligarchy during the time of a declaration. It would totally decimate any new election security law we pass because it gives the Secretary of State total authority to change any law during an emergency declaration, which is one of the big problems we've had in the past. And it codifies any order that the governor gets that would be a jailable offense if you didn't follow it. And so I have a hard time with those and several other parts to it, but the caption alone enough is what needs to change. Senator Brian Birdwell from out in the other side of Fort Worth has a bill. I'm a joint author with him. We started working on this back in about 3 or 4 months ago that will actually provide a structure that gets the legislature involved in a declaration within 30 days. And it reins in the executive powers, makes it clear that the executive powers are to be over changing rules and regulations, not laws in statute or in the Constitution. And so I'll be supporting that side. Sammy?
Secretary, last week, the Lone Star Coalition Representative Slayton talked about Texas. Would you like to explain anything to this group about the movement on a possible Texas?
I think what he's got, they've got in that bill is basically a study.
That's right.
To define what Texas would have to do if it decided that the federal government became so oppressive that the population voted to do something about staying in the Union. It's just to say, and from the standpoint of the fact there's a lot of talk about you can do it, you can't do it. Not many people know what all is involved, and I think this bill will lay it out. If it ends up doing what it says it's going to do, is so people are able to make an informed decision and not just an emotional decision. Yes, sir.
Jack Alexander. I wrote you a proposal and set it out in a letter form of some things about voter integrity that I thought ought to be considered. I wondered whether or not you got that letter.
Yes, sir, I did, and it was part of what we considered. We reached out and took input from everybody that wanted to speak on the issue. I went to Heritage Alliance, got them to help us with it. Every organization out there, True the Vote and others that had an input, we put it all together. The omnibus bill I have, I think, covers about every aspect of election to tighten the loopholes we have out there on error. And believe me, we have a system that allows for a lot of error. We've had two major problems, one down in Hill County and one out in Midland, that changed an election, and it was all human error. So we've got a lot to be fixed there. Well, thank you guys for coming, appreciate it. If you have any questions, our office is open. No masks have been required up to date, and it's sure ain't gonna start now.